This video is going to cover auxiliary light wiring as well as auxiliary power wiring for the CB500X. The concept is to use the front option connector and run a wiring harness along the right hand side of the front cowl. Make use of the empty relay slot within the existing wiring harness, and also add an auxiliary power wire on the front of the tank. This method is nice in that the wiring is all self-contained, hidden within the cowl. It doesn't interfere with the fork itself. If that sounds interesting, please continue watching the video and I'll show you where to get the parts and how to do the wiring harness. Before I get into the wiring harness itself, this is my auxiliary light mount location. You can see a previous video I did describing this mount. It just uses a simple piece of aluminum. What I am doing for this new project is I've drilled a hole within the dash just large enough to fit my connector through, and then added a grommet into that hole so it makes a nice routing path for the wire. The wiring is within inside the dash, and it comes out right below next to the option connector itself. So it makes for a compact and nice tidy wiring installation. So before we get started on the wiring, I have a wiring diagram here which explains what I'm attempting to do. So over here on the right hand side we have power input, the switch input for the high beam switch, and then the output for the floodlights. So I've standardized on using the SAE style connectors. You can use whatever you want, but I like these as they're fairly common, and you can buy a lot of accessories with these connectors already available on the connectors. So I'm going to use 16 gauge wire for any wires that are actually flowing much current, and then I'll use 18 gauge wire for the connections to the relay, specifically on the coil side. That's what the crimp terminals I'm purchasing are designed for 18 gauge wire, so that's why I'm using this as is. So on the right hand side, another thing to be aware of is when you use these SAE connectors, you should make sure you use the appropriate side of the connector. So if there's power all the time on the hot side of the connector, you want that to be protected. So what that means is the hot side of the connection, the power should be on the female side of the jack. That's why these are laid out the way they are. So on the option plug, ground is common, so I'm going to wire the grounds for all three plugs to a common ground wire. That ground wire will come over here and I'll splice it into the ground side of the coil. So this is my relay. The relay has a coil which controls the switch, and then a switch which turns on and off the power. So the coil will be connected to the switch input. So the power from the switch input will drive the coil, and that will then splice into the ground wire. Since I'm doing this, I'm also going to extend the auxiliary power. I'll wrap this basically around the front of the tank up to the triple tree. So this will give me a nice clean wiring to provide auxiliary power up under the triple tree as well, so you can drive any accessories or heated grips, whatever you want, off of this power. So I'll basically run from the power input, I'll run a power and a ground all the way up to underneath the handlebars, the triple tree area. The coil will splice into that ground wire, and the power for the switch lights of the relay will also splice into the power wire. So, and other than that, it's fairly straightforward. So we have our input to the coil coming from the high beam switch connector. We then have the power going to the lights. So all these three plugs will basically plug in right underneath where the option connector is. I already have that set up. You can see a previous video on the wiring of that option connector. This relay will go into the relay socket, into the currently empty space. The relay uses crimp terminals, so these 4 connections will be done using crimp terminals, which just plug into the relay socket, and then this portion will extend basically up the side of the fuel tank up to the handlebar location, so it will provide me a source of power. Most of the parts you need for the wiring harness can be purchased from Corsa Technic. This is the same company you can purchase the appropriate connectors for the option plug as well from. They provide all sorts of electrical supplies for motorcycle and power sport industry. So I've ordered some 16 gauge wire. This is mil-spec wire. I already have 18 gauge that I'm going to use as well. You also need these 2 the crimp connectors for the relay. You need 2 of the 3/16 and 2 of the 1/4 inch. They also make this tool that allows you to remove these connectors from the socket. I bought this just in case. It was relatively inexpensive. It's good to have on hand if you're working with these crimp style connectors. And the last thing I purchased from them is they have like protective sleeving for the wiring harness. This is relatively inexpensive. You don't need to use this, but it just makes it for a nice touch for a harness installation. Some of the other parts you need are a relay. So these are a low profile micro relay. You can use any low profile sealed micro relay you have, or just purchase these as a spare part directly from Honda, from any motorcycle dealer, and the pricing is reasonable. I mentioned using grommets before to protect the wiring for the light itself. You can either use a standard Honda side panel grommet for the plastics, that works, or just pick up a standard grommet at your local hardware store. And the last piece of this is I have these 16 gauge, about foot long SAE extensions. So I'm going to cut these in half, and that will give me the connectors I need for both ends of the harness. If you plan on crimping the terminals rather than just soldering them, you'll need a F-type crimp tool. I really like this Engineer PA01 tool. It's a multifunction tool. It's relatively inexpensive, but very high quality. It works with a variety of different connector types, including kind of open barrel and closed barrel, F-type, and so on. It also has wire strippers. You can also pick up one of these less expensive crimp tools. These work as well. Doesn't work quite as well as the Engineer, but this is available as well, and these are fairly inexpensive on eBay. So this is the nearly finished harness. One thing to note here is that the splice with the 4 wires, that's actually 5 wires there, that's pretty ugly. It's probably a better way to do that splice. I ended up just twisting the wires and twisting the 3 plugs to begin with, soldering, and then soldering each additional wire on top. Didn't turn out great, but I think it's going to be fine. The solder joint is kind of ugly. One thing you can note as well is you can use these very small cable ties as stress relief or strain relief. I've cable tied the protective jacket in place as well, so it won't move. So the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to use liquid electrical tape, which is basically a liquid rubber material, to cover up these joints. I'll put probably 3-4 coats of that on here to make these nice and water resistant and waterproof. And then the last thing will be to crimp on the final connectors that go into the socket, and then I'll go install it. This is the harness as installed on the bike. So we have the power line, the high beam switch line, and then the power going out to the light itself. And these are routed to the base of the rubber covering for the relay socket. And I've actually used a cable tie to tie everything to the existing wiring for stress relief and to prevent things from moving around. And then my auxiliary power gets routed up underneath, zip tied, cable tied to the bracket, up to the front of the tank and to the handlebars. So it's a very nice compact installation. One thing I may do once I put the side panel on and the cowling on, there is a bracket on the inside of the cowling, so these can actually be cable tied out of the way so they won't contact the forks. I'll probably cable tie them loosely to kind of pull them outboard a bit away from the forks, but nice compact installation, nice auxiliary power up at the handlebars. Yeah, it works very well.